What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm the Games Adjuster Ethan Rodriguez, and today we are talking about the 1 to 5 player game Wingspan. And so this one is still very hyped, it's still very hot, even though it's come out a couple of years ago now. I'm not only going to review the base game today, I'm going to be reviewing the two expansions, European expansion and the newest expansion, Oceania. So let's go down to the table. I'm going to show you how it plays. I'm also going to give you a brief showing of how I store the game currently, and then I'll come back here with those final thoughts. So here we go. Okay, to begin the game, every player is going to get 5 bird cards. These bird cards have a variety of different powers, which we'll talk about shortly. They will also start with one of each of the 5 main resources. They can choose to keep as many of the bird cards as they'd like, paying 1 resource for each one they keep. After that, they'll also be selecting one of 2 bonus cards to begin the game. These bonus cards will give you options for in-game scoring. For example, the forester here says birds that can only live in the forest. 3 or 4 birds of that type will give you 4 points. 5 birds will give you 8 points. And there's a whole stack of those that come in this deck there. You'll also get your 8 action cubes. These are how you'll be taking your actions throughout the game. You'll randomly select your first player. It's the first player token. You'll set out a number of goals on this goal tracker. The green side is a first, second, third place. There's no fourth place and more points for the first player or first place. The other side is a little more friendly. It's just as long as you've met a certain threshold, then you will get those points. These goal tiles have a whole variety of different ways to score. So for example here, some of them will say you have to have eggs on certain nest types. Others will say you need to have certain birds with a certain nest type and have eggs on them. Still others will require birds in certain habitats. There are 3 habitats on your board. You've got the middle kind of grassland area, the bottom wetland area, and then also this forest area here. All right, and so these will be randomly set out. They are double-sided, by the way. So here, example, eggs in water, birds in water. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of those which we won't totally get into, but there is a wide variety there. You'll also set out the other resources here. The game does come with some nice containers to hold the resources, these little plastic clear containers. It does come also with a dice tower. It's not pictured here. I prefer to use my personal nice wooden dice tray, but there is a nice cardboard dice tower. It's easy to assemble, as well as this card tray with this display of 3 cards to begin the game. And there you go. That's pretty much the setup. So playing a game of Wingspan consists of playing multiple actions over 4 rounds. At the first round, you will have 8 actions. At the end of each round, you'll be placing one of these cubes on the goal tracker, whether you scored it or not, and you will have less actions as the game goes on. So first round, 8 actions, second round, 7 actions, third round, 6, and the fourth and final round, you'll only have 5 total actions. On your turn, you can choose one of the 4 main actions to take. The main actions are play a bird, gain food, lay eggs, and draw bird cards. So let's go through those in order, starting with play a bird. In your hand, you're going to have birds available to play. The birds have a lot of icons on here, so let's walk through the anatomy here. The top left represents the habitats in which they can be played. Underneath that is the type of resources you'll need. So here, 2 grain and a berry. To the right is the name of the bird, the scientific name right underneath. A very nice illustration of the bird, the wingspan of the bird, the amount of points they give you. This particular bird is going to give you 8 points at the end of the game if it's in your habitat. The type of nest that they lay, where there are 4 main nest types and a star, which is a wild nest, and then the amount of eggs they hold, with finally some flavor text at the bottom and a geographical illustration here of where this bird may be located. This one is in North America. Okay, and so when you want to play a bird, let's say we're going to play this wild turkey, we would first need to have those required resources. Here, 2 grain and a berry. I don't have that right now, but for example purposes, let's say I had that there. I would pay those resources back to the supply, and then I'd place it in one of the appropriate habitats. So let's say I chose this habitat here. You're always going to place on the spot furthest to the left, because when you take any of these 3 actions, that's going to increase the amount of resources that you get. So let's talk about the next action here. And briefly, as you play more into the sections to the right, there will be a cost associated on the top. So The further you get, you'll not only need to pay the normal food cost on the card, but egg cost, and the eggs will need to already have been in your habitat by using the lay eggs action. So let's get into these actions now, starting with gain food. Anytime you take one of these actions, you're first going to place your cube on the leftmost empty space available and work down the line to the left. So in this example here, if I place this cube there, I will gain a food from the bird feeder. Optionally, can discard a card from my hand to gain another food. Anytime you gain food from the bird feeder, you're going to take one of the available dice here and the resource depicted on the dice, put it in your supply, and then remove the dice from the bird feeder tray. So in this example, I may want to take the worm, put it there, remove the worm. If I did want to just go ahead and discard the card, I could take another resource here. If ever you were to gain food from the bird feeder, and either A, there are one dice left, or B, there are only dice of the same symbol, then you optionally can choose to re-roll all of the dice before you make your selection, and then choose from the available resources there. One of the dice face has an either or between the wheat and the worm. The rest have the other faces in the game: the berry, the rat, the fish, and then the worm, and there you go, and the wheat by itself. Okay, and so that's the gain food action. Again, the more birds that you have, the more food you'll be able to gain when you take that. As you go throughout your actions, you'll move the cube down the line, activating any cards with a brown power. Before we move on to the other actions, let's kind of talk about what those powers are. So, some of the birds, when you play them, will have no particular ability, such as this wild turkey. It's just a lot of points. Other birds, like this American goldfinch, when played, will gain you resources from the supply. Still, birds like this one can allow you to play another bird in that particular habitat, paying its normal cost when it's played. Beyond that, you have birds that will only have their abilities activated when you take the particular action. So, for example, if we had played this hermit thrush previously and we took the gain food action, we would first gain our 2 food from the bird feeder. So let's just say we took 2 berries. Then we would move our cube down the line. And now this says, when activated, player or players with the fewest birds in this particular habitat will gain another food from the bird feeder. And that would start with the active player and move around clockwise. So here I now might take a fish. And then I'll move down the line, activating any other brown powers that are available until I get to the end. And then the next person takes their turn. These cubes are laid onto these different action spaces and stay there until the end of the round. The next action we'll talk about, or finally the last bird actually, is going to be these birds that activate in between turns. So if I had already played this bird here, the black-billed magpie, or magpie maybe, once between turn, when other players' predator succeeds, I gain a food from the bird feeder. Some of the birds in the game, like this northern gannet, are predators, but as indicated by this symbol here. And this one says, when activated, roll all the dice in the bird feeder. If any are fish, gain that many fish from the supply and cache them on this bird. Some abilities will allow you to cache food on the birds themselves by taking them from the supply and placing them on the particular bird. And these are going to be in-game points. Still, other birds will allow you to flip cards from the top of the deck, and if they have a certain wingspan above or below a certain threshold, then they can be tucked underneath the particular bird. And again, those are 1 point. Or not again, but they are 1 point apiece. Okay? So that's basically all the main birds. Let's talk about the last 2 actions here. And so the next action you can take is laying eggs. Again, you'll activate from the leftmost empty space, take the amount of eggs there, and then move further to the left. The eggs that are placed can be chosen based on any of these colors here. There are actually 7 total colors in the game at this point. The color is inconsequential to the action. It's just for nice production there. And you can place the eggs on any of the available birds in your habitat. The amount of eggs that you can place is illustrated on the bird itself, and they can be placed anywhere you'd like to. Some particular abilities will require eggs to be on the bird in order to score, so that may influence where you place them. You can only place up to that limit. If you would need to place more and you cannot, then they are lost. Okay? The birds never go in front of you. They stay on the cards themselves. They are not resources like these here. They are used for in-game scoring, as well as some of these paying costs for other birds. Now, the last area you have here is to draw more bird cards. When you draw bird cards, you can either draw from the face-up display here or from the decks themselves. When you draw birds, you will draw all the birds you need to draw, and then you will refill the face-up display. There are options to pay eggs to draw more cards, and there's also options to pay food to draw more eggs. When you would play birds, you can also pay any 2 resources for 1 other resource. So if you didn't have what you needed, that's a good way to get around that. So again, players will take 1 action at a time, doing everything they need to do on their particular action, moving on to the next player until the end of round is met. At the end of the round, players will assess whether they scored the particular goal and how many points they got there, placing one of their cubes on that particular track, and then beginning the next round by passing this token to the next available player in clockwise order, refreshing the display of cards here, playing over 4 rounds and counting in-game points. At the end of the game, players will get points for the birds that they have played in their habitat, the points on the birds themselves, any bonus cards that they accomplished, end of round goals as they track throughout the game, the amount of eggs on their board, each egg is a point itself, any food on cards is a point each, tuck cards is a point each, and Nectar is an expansion, which we'll go over now. So that's the base game. There are 2 expansions currently for the game. There is the Oceania expansion, which is the newest one, and the European expansion, which is the first one. The European expansion introduces more birds, gives you another tray for cards, gives you one of the extra colors here. There was 5 original colors. Now there was 6, the yellow ones, and I believe the purple ones came in Oceania, or actually backwards. Purple came in European, yellow eggs came in Oceania. The main add to the European expansion is going to be these end of round birds. So this here, the European honey buzzard, says at the end of the round, you can reset the bird feeder by rolling all the dice that are there and the ones that are outside the bird feeder. If you do, gain all the worms in the bird feeder after resetting. The Maltese warbler says end of round, if you used all 4 types of actions this round, play another bird, pay its normal food and egg cost. So there's a new ability. There are still some other abilities, but that's kind of the new mechanism, is the end of round bird. And then there's new cards for the Automa solo part of the game to go with the base game. Now, the Oceania expansion adds the most change. Beyond new birds and new abilities with those birds, the main mechanism change is going to be now end of game birds, like this magpie lark. It says end game, game end, discard 2 eggs from that particular habitat. If you do, play a bird in the plains habitat as its normal food cost, ignoring its egg cost. If it has a win plate or game end power, you may use it. So that's very cool. Also, both of these expansions will come with a variety of new scoring opportunities. So here, this one here says, from the European expansion, the most resources in your personal supply, or the most cards in hand. One of them, actually, in the Oceania expansion, says no goal, so that's pretty unique. Or the combination of food cost off your birds, this particular combo. And the other big change, and this is probably the biggest change, is going to be the introduction of a new resource, which you may have seen just off screen here, Nectar. So, Nectar is a wild resource that can be used in place of normal resources when you're paying for normal food costs. You'll also track when you spend those on this brand new board here. So, not only does this board allow the scoring of Nectar for in-game majority, so basically anytime you would play a bird, instead of paying its normal food cost, you can pay the Nectar. Also, if you had certain card abilities that require food cost to be spent, you can pay Nectar. The Nectar is only wild, or not really wild, whenever you would need certain icons in the dice, because you will get new dice with the expansion that have Nectar on them, as well as the normal facings. If a card said you needed, let's say, a worm, and there was a worm or Nectar here, if the worm's not present, then the card does not fire. Otherwise, anytime you spend the Nectar, instead of putting it back in the supply, you will place it on the appropriate area of the bird that you spent for it, and then this will be in-game points. Whoever has the most in each section will get 5 points. Second most will get 2 points. Also, the board is slightly different here. There are more opportunities to get additional resources. So when you compare to the base game board, here you just got the sections here that allow extra resources, and the final, basically 6th section. Here there are more varieties there, more opportunities. Also, you will get the opportunity to re-roll dice by spending any one resource before you take from the bird feeder, or reset the display here before you would take cards. And then still you can spend eggs or nectar to get an extra card, as opposed to on this board just spending the egg. And same thing here, you can spend food or cards instead of just spending the food. All right, and so that's basically everything here. Let me go back up top and tell you what I think about it, what I felt the expansions added or didn't add, and my overall final thoughts on all of Wingspan as it stands right now. Here we go. Hey guys, real quick, I'm going to show you my storage solutions, kind of an extra bonus video here in the middle of this review. I am a gamer that likes expansions, especially games I like. A little bit of a heads up spoiler there. But I also like to save space, and I'm not a huge fan of bringing a bunch of boxes down to play one game, even if I like the expansion. So when I have the opportunity to consolidate games into a single box, I take them. So Wingspan is no exception. I have gone ahead and gotten rid of the European expansion box, consolidated everything into the base game box with a couple of sacrifices. So what I did was I put all of the cards into the very nice card holders that the game came with. So I've shuffled them all together. You don't have to play with all the cards in every single game. If you want, you can sort them out and just play with the cards you want. But I don't see myself ever doing that. I'll probably play with all of it. So I put them all together and I set them just like this with the Automa rules on the bottom, because the Wingspan Oceania expansion is just not big enough to hold those rules. It's a little bit more of a square box, so that's unfortunate. It doesn't fit. And I have to keep them in this box. I don't want to get rid of them in case I ever do play solo. After that, I've got everything basically sorted into bags. I actually labeled these before I got the new bags, or kind of decided this. I need to get a new label here, but I'm a big fan of labeling, by the way. So I've got all my gold tiles on the side there, the Oceania dice in the box. Oh, sorry. The action cubes all together on the side, the end of round reference and first player tokens kind of up here on the top. And then I've basically consolidated all of the resources into 4 boxes, packed to the brim, all of the eggs with all the resources, including nectar, all fitting together into 4 boxes. When you unpack these, you're basically going to end up with 8 lids, which is more than enough. You basically have the 6 resources. Nectar kind of gets its own thing. The other 5 get their own, and then all the eggs together in 2 of the top sections, because the top is a little deeper than the bottom. But I think it's totally fine, workable. After that, I put the 5 new boards, because that's with the nectar included, in the top left here. The gold card, the new expansion scoring pad, because basically there's no reason not to use this one, even, I mean, unless you really wanted to worry about running out of copies. It has the nectar on there, but you could ignore that if you're playing without the expansion Oceania. So no reason to really have the other 2 in here. Keep that. Now you'll notice, glaring exception is I don't have the original game board, and I don't have the bird feeder in there. That's because all of that is in the Oceania box. So it's just big enough to hold the new boards, some of the promo stuff, kind of like the walkthrough game. The Automa cards I do have in here, just in case I use them. The OG dice. The bird feeder disassembled, and the scoring cards that came with the other 2, the base game and the European expansion. So if you're looking for a way to kind of store all of Wingspan, that's my recommendation, especially if you're one not wanting to bring a bunch of boxes down every time you try to play it, like me. So now that we got that out of the way, let me officially go back up top and give you my final thoughts. And by the way, glaring omission is, of course, got to put the rule books in there, right? Can't play a game without the rule book. So those go in there, but as you can see, everything fits nice and easy, just like so. All right, here we go. Let's go back up top. All right, there you go. That's how to play. Let's talk about it. We'll start with the theme. I think the theme is very good. It's very unique. Not a lot of bird games that I know of. It's not a theme that I'm particularly into, so it's not like I'm a big bird watcher or bird fan. I actually learned a lot about birds and just playing the game with all the flavor text. But it's unique. It's something approachable that folks can get into if they're not really looking for something super generic fantasy or super spacey or IP related. but they don't want anything that's real boring, right? Like another Mediterranean trading or um, Euro Noble Night Building or Engine Builder type game like that. So it's a cool theme. Again, not something that I'm super into, but I think it's very neat. As far as the production goes, wow, I mean, it's a really great production. The one oddball thing I think is just the action cubes, because everything else is so great. Like you've got these nice clear containers that come in the game to hold your resources, a dice tower bird feeder that is in the box, very cool. The cards are very nice quality. The rule book is linen finished. The little goal card is, I think, linen finished too. It's got this kind of grittiness to it, which is a little weird, almost like sandpaper, but not, but very high quality. It's not going to tear or anything. The artwork is really well done, just beautiful art. It's won all kinds of awards for that. I mean, it is a really, really great production. Stonemaier Games does a great job. Same makers of Scythe, Euphoria, Viticulture, all those games. So they do a great job every time, and this is no exception. It's just a beautiful game. I do have a couple complaints. Just really the dice tower and the storage. So the dice tower, I don't really use it like I showed in my overview, just because I kind of find it fiddly to like reach behind the dice tower to throw the dice in. It's fine. I mean, if you don't have one, it's really good. It's really cool that it comes with it. I mean, it's a really nice touch, especially being a bird feeder. But I just kind of roll them on the table or use, like I showed you there, I have a nice wooden one that's cost me like 80 bucks or something. So I kind of use it anyways, and I find it better for me. Also, yeah, just the cubes. I know there's like 3D printed birds, and I'm sure they're going to come out with some upgrade pack or something, maybe metal birds or something. Who knows? Well, they did metal mechs for sides. I'm not going to roll it out, but those are just, maybe oddball, but they're functional, right? It doesn't need to be anything special. It just maybe would have been cool if they were like little wooden bird meatballs or little bird minis or something. But it's totally fine. It doesn't change functionality. I'm not really putting a whole lot of dings on that. It's really, really minor. The rules are really easy. I mean, they're great. There's an appendix that explains all of the special abilities. Very easy to look up what you need. There's some forums for some of the new abilities, like some of the ones are like, what is, you score your cards based on if there's a body part in the name. So, like, mouth counts, beak counts. I actually don't think mouth is printed on the card, but there's a card that's like frog mouth type of bird. But there's already like Excel sheets and forums and posts about like what actually counts, what doesn't. There's also some weird goals that are like looking left, looking right, looking center, which one counts, and so they kind of broke that down too. But other than that, which is just like an interpretation kind of thing, the rules themselves are easy. You just play your card, you activate the brown ones as you go down the track. Some cards activate in between turns, other cards activate once per round or once per game. Very easy. Um, yeah, I don't really think there's anything confusing about the rules. Maybe it would have been nice just to kind of have like some kind of player aid, but I don't think it's necessary because it kind of breaks it down on the board itself. So, very good rules. The gameplay is really good. It's a great engine builder, and kind of that. I love those order of operation puzzles when you have to. You want to play this bird. It's got a wind plate ability, but you also want to play another bird in your hand because you want to play it sooner because maybe it's got this activation ability. It's going to go in the food section. You know you're going to be getting food a lot. You want to play it so that every time you activate food, you get more and more things. But you've already played a bird there, so now you need to get the egg. So you're kind of puzzling out, okay, first I need to get the eggs. Then I'm going to play this guy, which is going to get me an extra resource that I need to pay for this guy. And so it's very cool little puzzle there. I also like that all the birds have these cool powers, and you can do things on other turns. So it keeps you engaged when you have a turn, once between turns when another player's predator succeeds. So you see, Sally over here getting a bunch of resources. You say, okay, cool. Well, is that your predator? Okay, great. I get another resource too. Awesome. Or these double play birds. I love those where you play the bird, win played, immediately play a second bird with this particular habitat playing its normal cost. So you can combo those together, and maybe the original bird's not worth that many points, but it's going to help you maybe kind of sneak an extra play in there when players weren't expecting it, especially if you're going for the same goals. So you might have a situation where you and Sally have the exact same amount of birds. You have your last action. they're thinking, okay, well, there's no way they can play another bird. They don't have 2 actions to play 2 birds. I'm good. I'll have the lead. Or maybe she had one more than you to start in that situation. Well, then you play your double bird, and you get to play a bird and then the second one of the same type that maybe met that goal. And now in one single action, you've played 2 birds, which the other players weren't expecting, and you yourself have solely taken the lead on a particular goal instead of having to split some kind of tiebreaker in a tie. So that's really cool. There's all kinds of abilities. I didn't go over every single one, but the caching the food, the tucking the birds. I did find the tucking a little fiddly just because the rows aren't that wide. And so especially as you get more and more birds and food on different places, it can be a little fiddly to kind of scoot the bird aside and pick it up and slide it in there. But that's a minor thing. Um, the gameplay, I will say it can be kind of lucky. So I'm talking about all the expansions in this particular review. I felt like Oceania and the European expansion didn't add a whole lot, just more variety, which is totally fine. Not every expansion needs to bring in some new total mechanism way to play. They both brought in just some minor things, some new card abilities, some new timing on the cards, end of round, end of game, the wild resource, and then the new boards. Now, the wild resource I kind of feel it's a little anticlimactic sometimes with the bird feeder. So before, kind of felt like it was good tight resource economy there of people taking different things, and you can re-roll it a lot, and you're going to get what you want. Now it kind of seems like you're always going to go for nectar, and it kind of doesn't. I don't know. It takes away from the other resources, and I like that you can go to the majority, but you can kind of get stuck with some bad dice rolls if all that everybody took the nectar and you're just left with something that you really don't want. You roll it, you don't get any nectar. That can kind of be a little bothersome. Now it's not going to happen that all that often. I think nectar's on like 4 of the 5 dice, or it might be on all of that actually. It's on all 5 of them in multiple sides, but there is a chance you don't get it, which is kind of crummy. Also, I feel like because there's so many cards, and you don't have to play with all the cards. That's a choice I'm making. And it says in the rules you can play with all of them, or you can just play with certain ones. But if you play with all of them, there's a lot of cards. Because there's a lot of cards, you might get a little unlucky on which cards come out. I'm sure they consider this as part of their bonus cards and stuff, but I wonder, is the percentages still accurate with all the expansions? I don't know. I know in the base game, that's what the expansion, or they were basing those percentage of succeeding for the bonus cards, like how many birds in the deck have this particular attribute. I'd imagine that they thought about that and put it for the expansions if you put it all in, but I don't know. So that kind of makes me wonder, how good those bonuses are now because you have so many cards to choose from. Also, if someone takes the one bird you kind of wanted before it gets to your turn, that can kind of stink. Now there are 3 face up, and you can draw blindly from the deck, so it's not that punishing because there's a lot of birds and they're all really good in different ways. So I think that's fine, but just be aware of that because it can kind of sting, especially in a larger player count, 4 or 5 player game. I would probably always play with the Oceania boards and the Nectar. As much as I complain about the Nectar being wild, like I probably would because I think it just opens up more cards and more ways to score. And I like the wild resources. It is very handy to have, even if you don't get to keep it from round to round. As far as the, I guess that's it on the gameplay. I really don't have any other complaint. I think it's really solid. The time wise, it's really quick. Turns just kind of zip around. You play your bird, next turn, I'm going to activate your things if people are interested in what you're doing. What dice are out there when you're re-rolling them. They're kind of looking like, ooh, I can get this die now, or I was going to get the fish earlier. Now I'm going to maybe get the rat first, and I'll play this card now. Or, ooh, what cards should come out there now? I mean, look at those. There's a ton of things going on between turns that keeps players engaged, and I think that's really good. And the setup's not that long. You just kind of shuffle a bunch of cards. And again, if you're playing with all the cards, maybe that adds a little bit because there's a lot of cards to shuffle. But putting out the resources, they come in little bins, super handy. And then you just give players their board and their cubes and draw the 5 cards each, draw your 2 bonuses, choose what you want, and you move on. So very quick setup, very quick teardown. And if you're storing it like me, it makes it even that much quicker. I have it all in this one box. I still have the Oceania box. It's right here where I keep, like I showed, some of the original game components that I probably will never use, but it's here. Now, if they come out with a single box, big box, kind of like they did with Scythe, that I have a legendary box for Wingspan, that would be kind of cool just to have everything in one box. maybe with some new content. I don't know if that's on the horizon, but that would be cool. I'd totally probably get it just to make it that much more convenient to play either version while still containing one box as opposed to the two. But I think just having it all in one box makes the setup that much easier. And then finally, variety. Like I said, there's a ton of cards. And so the variety is really high. The different goals that you'll have per game, there's only 4 per game. All those goal tiles, and there's probably like 16 to 20 of them at this point, it's a really high number. They're double-sided. So when you take that into account, you're looking at maybe 32 to 40. Again, I don't really know how many there are, but it feels like a lot of different scoring. Now, they're not all that different. It's going to be like birds in this area, this area, this area. But from game to game, it's going to influence what you go for. And then what kind of birds you get to start the game will really influence kind of the tactics you take. If you get a few that are the predators and you're caching a lot of food or birds under your cards, that's going to be much different than if you really don't get any of those and you get a lot of activation things. Or if you get a lot of the combo birds where you play double, you really might just go for, I want to get a lot of birds out of my habitat and get a lot of points straight from the birds, not necessarily a lot of activation points from the whenever I take those actions. So the variety is really high, and it's something that again you can kind of take those expansions in and out to change it up a little bit more or less, but throwing it all in makes it even more variety in my opinion, just because there's so many birds and so many birds you could play the game probably 10 times and still not see some birds. There's that many cards, so that's really cool. But yeah, I mean overall, glowing review. Yeah, it's got a lot of hype and it's warranted in my opinion. It's a very good game, very solid production, very good expansions that don't make it that much more difficult and change this game from what it I think is originally intended to be. This is a great game for families. I play with my 11-year-old now. She played it when she was 10. It says 10 or more on the box. I think that's accurate. It's not that hard for her. She does play some other games too, so she's different than maybe the average kid. But I think you can play this with your family. I think you can play with mom and dad and grandma, grandpa, whoever, if they want to play it and they're into it. Especially if they like birds and they really like the artwork, they might be willing to come to the table. And even if you don't necessarily want to play it with your family and you want to play it with your gamer friend, then it's perfect for that too, because it's a great solid engine builder with good decisions and good tactics when you see the dice changing and the cards changing, what's available now, what's my best turn now. Those tactics are there, as well as the long-term strategy. You see all the goals at the beginning of the game, so you can kind of work towards the end goal with your very first card. Not only is my card maybe going to accomplish the goal that I get now, but it's also going to help me with that goal later. Or maybe I can't really do the first goal right now. I'm really going to focus on the last 3. So yeah, overall, with all that said, I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10 from me. I think it's a really good game. It's not like my favorite game ever. I do like some other engine builders a little bit more. And again, the theme, while I think it's really unique. It's not like a theme that I'm super into, but I really love the production. I really love the gameplay. It's really, 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 really solid. So it's pretty close to being a 9, but right now I'm going to give it an 8. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on it. If you like the game or don't like the game, let me know why in the comments below. If you played the expansions, do you feel like they add to the game or detract from the game? If you like them, which one's your favorite? If you don't, tell me why. And if you have other games like Wingspan that you suggest I check out, be sure to let me know that as well. Otherwise, I've been the Games Jester, Ethan Rodriguez. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you on the next one.